What's up in Yostros? It's the Russian dude. Picture this. A thief marches into your house at 3 a.m. in the morning, breaks your fence, empties your fridge, sets your couch on fire, and then, while the flames still rage on, leans against the smoldering doorframe and says, "Chill bro, relax, we can talk about rebuilding once the place cools down, and it's fire right now, so just let's do it later." That, friends, is Vladimir Putin's brand new definition of diplomacy. He is open to direct peace talks with Vladimir Zelensky, but only at the mystical final phase, that twilight moment when Ukraine has hemorrhaged enough blood and territory to make a ceasefire look like a mercy. Convenient? Absolutely. Cynical? You bet. Deadly? Off the charts. Yet this grotesque theater does not end on the scarred fields of Donbass. The script stretches southeast to Iran, where Israeli jets carve bright arcs across the sky, scorching nuclear facilities, shredding command bunkers, and vaporizing top commanders. I'm not going to discover America for you guys in today's episode. Everybody already knows what is happening in the Middle East. So instead, let's talk about one crucial phenomena of Putin's so-called loyalty to France. The Iranian example is just too good to ignore. Putin promised a multipolar world, but what he is delivering is a one-man magic show where alliances vanish in a puff of cheap smoke the second real danger reveals itself. St. Petersburg, once Peter the Great's window to Europe, now Putin's own echo chamber. This year's International Economic Forum was supposed to be a triumphant parade of contracts and clinking champagne glasses. Instead, it turned into a lecture where Putin, draped in imperial nostalgia, announced he would consider meeting Zelensky, but only during the so-called final stage of negotiations. Sounds generous? Well, look closer. The final stage is a code word for after the battlefield has settled in Russia's favor. In other words, when the last Ukrainian brigade is crawling, when foreign aid is in trickle, and when the international press has moved on to the next conflict, this is what, for Putin, means the final stage. Unconditional victory of Russia. But here's the kicker. To make that day feel closer, Putin even pulls out a pocket Ukrainian constitution, and guess what? He starts to interpret it in his own way, saying that Zelensky's mandate expired once martial law kicked in. Translation: the guy defending his country no longer counts. Hand me somebody pliable. He conveniently ignores the fact that the very same constitution says that for as long as there is war, presidential elections in Ukraine are not possible and current president stays in power. What can be the solution for Putin then, if he is ready to talk but not with Zelensky at this point? End the war, let Ukrainians have the elections, and then talk with either a new president or newly elected Zelensky. But Putin just makes it look like he wants to talk. Deep inside, he obviously could not care less. It's not a new tactic. Negotiation through delegitimization is the Kremlin's new favorite trick. In 2014 it was Kyiv is run by fascists. In 2015 it was the Minsk Accords are being sabotaged by Kyiv. In 2022 it morphed into denazification. Today the buzzword is illegitimacy. If you cannot erase Ukraine with rockets, try erasing its signature. The calculus is brutally simple. Stall talks, keep shelling flying, and let fatigue fester in Western capitals. Each missed vote in Congress, each hesitant parliament meeting chips away at Ukraine's lifeline. And meanwhile, Russian television feeds its audience highly new nightly fairy tales, heroic advances, NATO conspiracies, and the inevitability of Kyiv's collapse. When the final stage, so-called, finally dawns, if it ever does, Putin will stride in like a televangelist selling forgiveness, provided Ukraine signs over the deed to the east and agrees to cuff itself to Moscow's ankle for eternity. And if Kyiv refuses, well, perfect. More proof that it is Ukraine, and Ukraine only, who does not want peace. Broadcast at full volume that Ukraine loves war and Russia loves peace. A win-win scenario that Putin has, at least in his own head. But is that so? Can Putin be really trusted? Yeah, I laughed, but, well, we all already know the answer. No need to even go too far for an example. How about Putin's so-called loyalty to friends, such as Iran, and the desire to reduce the Western influence of the world? How did it all work out when Putin's supposed ally got engaged in a war with Israel? Let's talk about it in our next chapter. Let's go back 5 months. Lavish chandeliers in the Kremlin, fresh ink on the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty, and so forth. Russian state media proclaimed an unbreakable bond, Iran in Russia, shoulder to shoulder against Western hegemony. Fast forward to Operation Rising Lion, Israeli warplanes roar over Esfahan, debris rains, and Iran Revolutionary Guard scrambles for answers. Where is Russia? Where is Putin? Where is the unbreakable bond now? Hiding beneath a podium in Moscow apparently, reciting the same narrative about restraint and dialogue, while quietly continuing to count rubles from record oil prices. Iran supplied Russia with Shahed 136 drones when the missile stocks ran low. It licensed production lines on Russian soil. It funneled engineers and schematics, letting the Kremlin rain cheap kamikaze swarms on Ukrainian power stations. Tehran thought it had secured a guardian, maybe even a big brother with nukes on its own. Instead, when Israeli missiles started turning radar sites into charcoal, Russia offered thoughts and prayers, and then even some kind of a hotline that goes straight to voicemail. Why the sudden cold feet? Because Moscow's survival math says the Gulf monarchies matter more than the others. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates keep OPEC Plus humming, shield Russian crude from price cap shock, and shovel petrodollars into joint investment funds. On the other hand, Iran, a nation already radioactive to world markets, makes zero sense to a Kremlin balancing on sanction-cracked ice. Throw in the risk of tangling with the US carrier groups parked in the Mediterranean, and Tehran's please dissolve faster than sugar in Putin's samovar tea. Of course, Putin pretends otherwise. He calls Supreme Leader Pezeshkian, calls Netanyahu, calls Trump, bills himself as the lone statesman who can dial down the Armageddon. Reality check: Israel keeps doing its thing, Washington keeps sanctioning, and Tehran keeps screaming into the complete void. The so-called mediator tag costs Moscow nothing and buys headlines hinting at relevance, a cheap bargain when your real assets are shrinking faster than the ruble. But the costs are mounting. Iranian hardliners, already allergic to trust, now mutter openly about Russian betrayal. Those Shahed drone factories, well, maybe they slow roll. Those back-channel oil swaps, maybe they suspiciously conveniently vanish. Even China, watching from the balcony, flies this episode under note to itself. Kremlin's loyalty has an expiration date. Not just China, obviously. All the other kind of allies of Putin scribble down on the response of Russia. What if they need help at some point? Will Putin come to their aid? As of recently, it, well, does not look like it. Iran is merely the latest beat on a string of bruised partners. Cast your memory back to Bashar al-Assad and other people and countries that Putin abandoned and betrayed. Let's quickly go over them in our next chapter, and you will see for yourself that the world of Putin is worth absolutely nothing. For nearly a decade, Russian warplanes bombed Syrian cities to rubble, trumpeting an iron-clad alliance. But when Damascus finally imploded last winter, economy flatlined, regime functions knifing each other for scraps, Putin's jets were busy elsewhere, and Bashar al-Assad caught the very first exile flight back to Sochi, Russia. The message landed across the Middle East. Moscow's security umbrella is made of, wet newspaper. Putin needs something, get it to him, fast, or we are no longer friends. If you need something, well, you are on your own, brother. Sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry. Or take Armenia, a collective security treaty organization ally since the 90s, leaning on Russian peacekeepers to deter Azerbaijanis. Last fall, when Baku pounded Nagorno-Karabakh into surrender, the peacekeepers sat in barracks polishing radios that mysteriously malfunctioned. That is why they were not able to hear those cries for help. Ooh, surprise, surprise. Yerevan's reward for decades of loyalty, well, just shrugged shoulders and a polite invitation to join the Eurasian Economic Union. Membership card discount on a coffin, which is also not even included. These are not isolated examples. They are symptoms of a strategy obsessed with optics over outcomes. Each new so-called partner is a pawn for Kremlin narrative. Proof of global reach, proof that sanctions do not bite, proof that Russia is not alone. But pawns are disposable. Once their value dips, off the board they go. Assad, Armenia, Iran, just different countries, different leaders who share the very same fate. And the wider world is catching on as well. Turkey, for example, buys S-400s, yet hedges with NATO. India signs energy contracts, but declines joint condemnation of the West. Even China, Russia's supposed no-limits friend, quietly dictates long-term loan contracts like a shark sensing blood. Meanwhile, back home, the war in Ukraine devours men and money at industrial scale. Satellite images show mass graves in Belgrade, Mothers wait outside draft offices clutching summonses for the sons with 1 month of training and a lifetime of debt. The Kremlin spins it as kind of patriotism. The markets label it is what it is, a demographic annihilation. So when Putin boasts of alliances, just remember guys, there is scaffolding around a hollow tower. Pull one beam, I don't know, Syria, Iran or Armenia, and the whole structure collapses. Another year of war, another volley of Israeli missiles, another embarrassing retreat, and the grand chessboard starts to look like a cheap checker mat made by, I don't know, Russian Wagner prisoners. Let's zoom back to that St. Petersburg forum we mentioned at the beginning of the video. The city's baroque facade gleam, but the VIP guest list reads like a reunion of pariahs and opportunists. CEOs from Europe, no more gone. Wall Street bankers, ghosts. Instead we get sanctioned oligarchs comparing their yacht lengths, at least yacht lengths, and a small list of officials from countries desperate for discounted fertilizer. Yet Russian state TV broadcasts non-stop coverage, framing the event as proof that isolation is a myth. Cameras zoom in on every single handshake and every obscure delegate from more than 140 countries and territories. They do not mind that half those budgets belong to trade reps hunting grain deals, not investors ready to pour billions into Siberian gas pipelines. On stage, Putin speaks about global instability, Western hypocrisy, and Russia's resilience. Off stage, whispers swirl about current currency controls, labor shortages, and the quiet renationalization of industries destroyed by mobilization. The consumer market shrinking, tech exodus ongoing, defense spending, a black hole swallowing schools, hospitals, and pensions. But the lights must stay bright. The orchestra must play, because if the music stops, the crowd just very well might hear the sirens from the front lines. Then comes Putin's offer to mediate Iran in Israel. It's classic smoke and mirrors scenario. Advertise yourself as a firefighter while your pockets overflow with matches. The Kremlin knows the offer will likely be ignored, but offering is the trick. It's not sometimes helping another person, it's about offering help, what matters for so many people. Like, you know, when you are tipsy with your new friend, who probably just even met just tonight, and then you tell him, bro, if you ever need my help, just call me, day or night, no problem, I got you, bro. The problem for Putin is that his bro is actually calling for help and Putin just doesn't want to pick up the phone, apparently. Meanwhile, domestic propaganda pumps out victory montages, shattered leopards, burning Abrams tanks, drone footage looping like bad gifs. Disconnect between televised triumph and refrigerated morgues grows by the week, and while ordinary Russians hunt pharmacies for imported medicine, Kremlin insiders snatch mansions in Dubai, just in case the ruble's next plunge leaves them with counting pennies. Penny, yes. Not the other one. Putin made everything possible to separate himself and his inner circle from filthy regular people, and so now he wonders why this filth does not even want to stand in line up to defend their favorite Tsar, so yeah, surprise, surprise. Well, there you have it guys, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, the links down below, for example, you can donate through PayPal or subscribe to our Patreon, a very good way to support our work and to stay independent. Thanks so much for watching, see you tomorrow.